Hey everyone, we did a pretty in-depth look at how to use our golf DFS optimizer with our friend the Degenerate 75. I'm gonna go ahead and just jump to that recording where we look at basically all the advanced settings, all of this, how to get started on using the optimizer. I think it's a fairly good mix for new users to watch and to get up to speed on how to best utilize the golf
Oh,
optimizer.
Glenn, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Better now that you're here. We're going to be looking at last week's tournament, right? Because that has all the ownership and the ceiling projections and all that, and just so they can get a full vibe, because we don't have all that stuff out for Sony yet.
Correct. So basically, right now I have if you just go to the solver and you log in, it just automatically goes to NFL. So I'm just gonna go ahead and show you like if you scroll over DFS Optimizer up here, you can click on golf. I just want to show you guys how to navigate around the site a little bit, just because I know that's an important piece. For golf, we have all of our slates by date. So if you're playing a date that was the 12, for example, like you want to make sure you've selected the 12. Usually we auto default to the next slate. So that's why right now, today's the 10th, but we're auto defaulting to the 12th because that's the next slate. But I'm going to go ahead and select the 5th, which was the last tournament that we have data for here. Um, and just kind of walk you through some of the stuff. I mean, the first biggest thing that I think people need to like know is that there's this projections um, drop down here, and you can select Degenerate 75. The sample projections come with every single account on the solver, and then if you have an ETR account, you also will have access to the ETR projections. So since we're doing this for the Degenerate 75, we're going to use these projections today, and I can kind of walk you guys through that. So just to kind of I guess give you an overview of like where things are. On the left side here, as you can tell, we have this player page. It has all the players. Um, at the bottom here, there's some pretty cool and easy ways to select what players you're looking at. So, for example, you can say all my selected players or all my excluded players, which currently I haven't excluded anyone. Um, and if you do want to exclude players, you can just sort of click on a name, and here you'll see how it shows up in red. And now if I go to my excluded players, it shows these guys. So this is just a quick way to sort through different guys. There's also this little button that says hide players projected under zero point 0.1 points. So, if you hit that, um, I don't think there's anyone projected for 0 points. Oh, there's, I guess, Rory is here. So, if I hit that, Rory doesn't show up anymore. So just simple things like that for sorting. On the right side is where the actual, like, I guess, quote unquote optimizer is. If you just hit optimize, you're going to get the top optimal lineup here. And if you hit like, optimize 10 lineups, it sort of uh, drops down to, I don't want to say another screen, it just down to the bottom of the page where these lineups show up. So the degenerate, does this sort of make sense here? Like, do you have any
Yeah,
questions on this part of the screen and where I'm at so
yeah.
far?
Everything's pretty good. Just those ten quick lineups you did, it does do those in ascending order, right? Those are like the 10 most optimized lineups based on what we had selected, right? Like I noticed 606.9 is the highest, and then it goes 606.7, and then they just
Correct.
kind of keep going down in value from there, right?
Yep. So these are basically sorted right up here on the page. You can sort by different things. So you can sort by ceiling. So if you sort by
Ooh.
ceiling, they're potentially going to be sorted in a different order because different players have different ceiling projections. Um,
I've already learned something. I've already learned something.
you can sort by projected ownership, sum and product. If you don't know the difference, I
Ooh, you have
believe
product ownership?
we do have product ownership.
Let's
Yeah.
go. That's clutch. I talk about that all the time. That could be amazing. So yeah, click on that. I'm curious.
Yeah. So basically, the way the product ownership works is we we calculate a product ownership and then we just like multiply it by a big number just to make it into a readable number because otherwise you get like a million decimal points.
Exactly.
Um, so that's why we sort of do that. I believe we have a tutorial on product versus some ownership. If we don't, it's going to be out soon. So I'll show you guys
Well,
the tutorials
now
page a
what would
little
be
bit
really
later.
neat? Solver partner is one day we can go enter that number that you guys are multiplying it by, and it could be for the number of entrants in the contest that we're thinking, right? So if we're playing in the Millie Maker that week and we want the number to be 118,000 entrants that are in it, we could have that as our multiplier number. So that number would make sense. And if we're playing in something with just 5,000 people, we could enter 5,000 entrants, right?
Yeah, I think that's also on the roadmap. I do want to do something where we have, I guess, like a quote unquote projected, projected how many times the lineup would be duplicated, which would be super useful for golf and for like Showdown NFL. That's definitely coming at some point in time. We're just sort of working out the math behind it, but being able to select the contest size on that and having that in the future is definitely something that we're working towards.
Verbal bets are binding, sir. We're holding you to it.
Perfect. So then I guess I'll kind of continue going through this here. I went through the projections drop down. There's also this variance drop down here where we have three different variance numbers. We have ETR, we have solver low, and solver high. ETR is only available to ETR customers, but for golf, I would say it's actually fairly similar to the other two. So the way variance works is, let's say you have someone projected for 100 points and you have zero variance. However many lineups you generate, this player is always going to use a projection of 100. If you're using a variance of, let's say, like 10% for this player, his projection for every single lineup will vary between 90 and 110. So if I set, let's say I use like solver law variance, I can see like Scotty Scheffler has a variance of 15%. So every single lineup that's generated with this variance is going to use a projection for Scotty that's somewhere within the range of like minus 15% to plus 15% on his projection. Does that sort of make sense? And let me know if you have any questions off of that. I do want to be fairly clear on variance. It's something that generally I only recommend using if you're building like 150 lineups. Because it's like a good way to like spread out your exposures and not have like your players like clumped together and et cetera, et cetera. We also do have a tutorial specifically on variance, and I would recommend, if anyone is going to use variance, it's actually down here at the bottom, how to use variance of the solver. I really would recommend people read this if you're going to be using variance, but for the most part, I think it's a fairly advanced setting, and I would definitely read that if you were going to use it.
You would want to use that, especially like if you're optimizing and it keeps just putting you on the same players over and over and over, even though you may have 20 guys in your player pool and it just keeps putting you on like the same 13 guys. You would want to increase the variance, and then it would probably account for that and probably get more of the players from your player pool in there, right?
Yeah, for sure. If I'm creating basically, like, let's say if I'm creating like one or two or three lineups, I'm never going to use variance. But if I'm creating even 20 lineups, usually I would use, I mean, personally, I like the high variance. I use high variance for every sport, just because
Explain to me again, what's the difference between the low and the high?
it's basically, I mean, just a different, so it's going to be a different percentage in here. So for example, for Scotty,
15.
the low is going to be 15, the high is going to be
I
like
see.
23.
Okay, that makes sense. Just how wide is the variance? I see.
Exactly. For golf, these numbers are fairly similar because of like how the projections work for golf. For NFL, I think it's really important to use good variance because I think, for example, a wide receiver who's projected for 6 points should have a much higher variance than like a quarterback who's projected for like 24 points.
Wide receivers have to have quarterbacks that can throw them the ball in a positive game script. Every golfer gets 72 holes.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's a brief overview of the variance, but I will say that if you are going to use it, I definitely recommend checking out the tutorial.
Beautiful. And that tutorials was just up there at the top under tutorials.
Correct. Next up, I can go over this little optimize by button. So basically, just to kind of, I guess, give you an overview of what the optimizer does is the optimizer takes in these projections that are in this column here, and it finds the lineup which has the highest number of projected points. So if you're optimizing by projection, you're going to find the lineups that have the highest projected points. If you optimize by ceiling, you're going to find the lineups that have the highest projected ceiling, and similar with ownership. I think for if you are going to optimize by ownership, I would be extremely careful. I think I would kind of use that to maybe see like what the chalk lineups are and kind of get an idea of things. But I would never recommend like playing a lineup that's optimized by projected
I was just
ownership.
wondering why the hell
Personally.
you'd ever want to do that. Because, I mean, if anything, it's a useful tool to kind of see what would be the 10 chalkiest builds just based on what we're seeing with ownership, how they piece together. So in that sense, it's awesome. But if you're using it to build your lineups, you're kind of missing the point of PGA DFS.
I agree. I mean, for any sport, I really wouldn't like play a lineup, but it is super useful for figuring out like what other people are playing. Going over to the advanced settings tab.
Before you jump into that, just because it's on the main screen here,
Yep.
boost and dock. Can you go over that real quick? I was messing around with that, and I like it that I can boost a guy up or dock him a point or two. But what does that actually convert to as far as like their projections and whatnot?
Yeah, so basically one boost is going to be 5% up, one dock will be 5% down. So if you go to two boosts, it's going to be 10%, three is going to be 15, and so on. And we only go up to five. So just an easy way to boost players up and down a little bit. I do want to note super briefly for NBA, I believe it's 4%, and for NFL, it's 8%. The reason it's different between sports is just because how the projections work. I mean, if you do like a 4% boost on an NFL player, it's not really going to make a big difference. So that's why we have them a little bit different percentages wise. But that's listed in the FAQ if you are interested in that.
So I hope you know who Patrick Rogers is. I got to tell you, I'm a little disappointed I can't go dock him 20 times and get him down to 0% where he belongs.
Oh, well, there's an easy way. So like if you do want to do that, you can click on a player's projection and just type in zero.
Oh shit! Dropping a bomb on us. I didn't know you could do that.
Yep.
Okay.
I believe almost all of these are overwritable. And then if you want to clear all of your overwrites, you can click this little X button up here for each column. So even if I have like multiple guys with overwrites, you can click the little X. It's just gonna clear the whole column. Same with the boost and the dock. So that stuff is customizable.
Right. So when I'm looking like last week, I know you don't play a lot of PGA, but our dude Xander Schauffele was very questionable heading into the tournament. I could have went and docked him down 5, right? And it would have dropped him 5 times, and he would have hardly ever shown up, and I would be accounting for the risk that I am taking on because of that, right?
Correct. Yep. And then another way to sort of keep things in check is, you could always set a max player ownership. So, let's say you have concerns that he was injured, you can just set like a max 10%. So like max 10% of your lineups will have Scotty if you select this. There's also a min percent. So like let's say, who's a guy that you liked last week that was towards the bottom in terms of projection?
JT Poston, right there.
JT Poston. So let's say you wanted to force some of him, you can put in like 2 or 20% for that. So and for minimum exposure, we do have a tutorial on that as well. That's one of those tricky settings that if you are going to use it, I definitely recommend checking out the tutorial for as well.
I've built enough lineups to know exactly what the tutorial is going to say. Whenever
Perfect.
you start putting 50% minimums on 15 guys, it's like, bro, you can't optimize that. It's literally impossible.
That's probably true. That's probably a little bit too much ownership, but yeah, you definitely can set the minimum exposures, maximum exposures, and yeah. Any other questions on this page?
No, I just want to remind everybody while you're going to click on advanced here
Yep.
that like this can't make lineups that are mathematically impossible, right? So if you go I only want 5% of these scrubs in my lineups, but I want 100% Scotty and Rom in every lineup. I mean, like mathematically, it's going to be impossible. So don't just think because you click on guys and think that you want that percentage. There is a thing called math that won't allow certain lineups to be constructed.
Correct. Yeah.
You got to remember that.
Perfect. Well, off of that, we can go into the advanced settings here. These rules at the top, for the most part, I think fairly self-explanatory, but I will go over them. Salary cap percentage. So let's say you wanted to, I don't know, say like you don't want to use more than 49,500 in salary. You can sort of set a max. You can set a minimum if you wanted to. That's pretty straightforward. Unique players. So this setting basically says like if you set it to 2, you can't have a lineup and then have another lineup that has only one player different from the first lineup. So this will require 2 players to be different between every single lineup. That's a good way to spread out your exposures as well. If you bump this up to like 2 or 3, you can set a max lineup ownership. This is for the sum. We currently don't have a way to set a maximum for the product. Something that we are considering adding. This is a really good way to keep your lineups in check in terms of not getting too chalky. What number to set here is going to vary wildly on slate and on sport. If it's really hard to compare golf to something like NFL, just because like NFL has much lower owned players and sometimes
I know these numbers very well. For golf, you usually don't want that number creeping very high over 80.
Over 80? Okay, that sounds very reasonable, especially for 6 players.
Yeah.
Cool. And then for this is for like max player exposure. So we already talked about setting a max player exposure. If you wanted to set it for every single player, you can just do it here. This setting here is a little bit advanced. I don't really want to get too much into it. I would just say my recommendation is to use the top one. But there is a description if you do want to read through what that does. There's also a way to, so we went over the variance here on this page, and there's default, there's ETR, there's solver, and low and solver high. These 3 options here are basically just our calculations on what we think the variance should be, based off of math that we've done on whether it's like certain players, how volatile they are, what position they play, etc., etc. If you set this to default, you can basically set your own from the advanced settings tab, which is here. So you can like set this to 30, and if you've set this to default, you can see that this has populated 30 for the whole column,
which is really high.
That's pretty high. Yeah, I would say that's fairly high.
Because it looked like almost everybody was falling in that 15 to 20 range. So 30 is almost double what we were seeing a second ago.
Correct. Yep. And then I'm going to go over some of the more advanced settings now. So if we go over here on stacks, this is pretty self-explanatory. This is just tee times. So, if you wanted to, let's say there's like some bad weather in some of the later games or something, you can uncheck some of these later start times. And then just like, you want to use at least like, let's say like 4 players from like these 4 start times. And you can select from which round as well. One thing to note is that sometimes, from what I've noticed, golf tournaments will announce both round 1 and round 2 start times. Sometimes they'll only announce round 1. So that's something to be worried about whether round 2 even has announced start times.
Well, that's good. That one right there is going to save me so much time at the majors and stuff when I play a wind edge, and I can be like, just go play these tee times. Going to be so amazing, especially for showdown where like, a random Saturday I'll have gusts all afternoon, but nothing in the morning. So I can be like, don't play any of these guys in the afternoon. That'll be nice.
Yeah. One thing that also I want to note, this is a little bit more on the advanced side, but let's say you want some lineups. Let's say you're building 100 lineups. You want some lineups to have 4 guys from these start times and some lineups to have 3. Currently, there's no, I would say, really easy way to do that here. But one way to do it is you can just say, I want to use at least 4 players from these start times. You can go and run 10 lineups. And then, oops, I think I have way too many adjusted settings right now.
Yeah.
Let me go back here. Oh, I have the max ownership. What else do I have here? Let me see. Oh, let me reset this. Oh, I think I have. Yeah, I think this is just way too many players from these start times. I don't think there's actually that many players from these start times.
There's only going to be 24 guys in that time period.
Yeah, so let's say, I've set it to 1 right now. I can go ahead and hit optimize and I get 10. So let's say I want to create 10 more lineups that have 2 guys from those start times instead of 1. Once I've created 10 lineups already, you can see I hit optimize. Now down here, I can hit advanced settings again. I can change this to 2, and then I can just hit the add more button. So then, I'm gonna have my 10 first lineups, and then it's gonna add another 10 lineups here with the new setting that I just changed. So I think that's a good thing to consider when you do want to run some different stacks and different options there. Moving on, I'm gonna go to restrictions. This is an area where a lot of people can get in trouble a little bit. So I'll just be really, really careful with just reading the rules that you're setting here and making sure it is what you want it to be. So there is stats by lineup and stats by team. Obviously, there's no teams in golf, but for NFL and NBA, these two can be very different. For example, if you want to set minimum one player where the ownership percentage is less than 10, you would want to do it per lineup. You wouldn't want to do it per team, because you don't want that for every single team. That usually would result in an invalid lineup. But yeah, this is a good way to force low owned players, or maybe some more contrarian options for different sports. There's just different things you can do. You can max how many players you want per team, and things like that. So this is a good section.
For golf, it'll be really useful for product ownership, right? Like if you say I want at least 2 guys at less than 5%, you will start to get a tremendously low product ownership.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, for golf, I think the ownership stuff is really the most important, the most usable. I think what I have here with these rules are similar to what I ran. I think I had this to 15 or something. This is what I ran last weekend, because I actually did play a little bit of golf last weekend. I watched your show, so I got the plug. I had to play a little bit.
Did you win?
No, I played. I actually, my lineup was really good, but I played the hurt guy, so it was not great. But that was my fault for playing the guy who was questionable going in.
Oh yeah. If you in a no cut event, if your guy WDs, you can just call it a day.
Yeah,
no chance.
It was at least I didn't have to sweat,
Yeah.
So yeah, this is where you can do that. You can set at least one player where ownership percentage is less than 10. For other sports, you can select different positions from this drop down here. I'm not gonna go into the by team one because obviously it doesn't apply for golf. I'm not going to go by start time because also doesn't apply for golf. I will say this is just different than the tee times. We should probably remove this from here for golf. I'm going to make a note for that. And then there's the player groups. This is also fairly self-explanatory, I think. You can do for example, you like 2 guys like Tony Finau and Colin Morikawa. You want at least one of these 2 guys in every lineup. You can just set this rule here. Or maybe there's some really expensive chalky guys or something that two really expensive chalky guys. You don't want to play them together. I don't know who that was last week, but I'm guessing Rom and someone else. So you will set at most one of those 2 or something like that. That's where this can be pretty useful.
What are the 3 drop zones there? At least, at most, and exactly.
Okay. Yep.
Gotcha.
And then
can you give me a quick example of when you would use exactly?
I'm trying to think. For example, in the college football national championship, theoretically, I mean, this is not something I did, but you could have said, I want to use exactly one Georgia running back in every single lineup.
Okay.
So
that once again, that exactly doesn't seem to really have much use over in the PGA world.
Yeah, probably not something that you're going to use much in PGA.
Yeah, if you're going to use exactly one, that would be 100% of a guy, which you could just go mark as I want to have full exposure to this guy, right? Which isn't there a little lock button something? I feel like we skipped that. You can just go click lock and it'll put a guy 100% in your lineups.
Yep. So let me exit out of this. I'm going to scroll back up here. There is this little lock button here. Oh, no spots available. Let me clear this lineup. So yeah, you can just hit the lock button. This guy would be in 100% of your lineups.
Okay.
Worth noting in this exactly thing here, you can just list multiple players. So, this is I guess this kind of goes to the, let's say there's 4 expensive guys that are all chalky, and you don't want to play all of them together or something. You can say exactly one of the 3 of them. Again,
so
it's not
you build your
Go ahead.
You build your player pool and you have like 3 chalky guys in your player pool, and you're okay eating the chalk, but you don't want to eat the chalk with them in the same lineup together.
Exactly. Yeah, this would be a way to do that. You would just say I want to use exactly one of those guys. Usually, what if I'm playing, I would do it at most one because I would want some lineups without those guys. But again, we have the option if anyone ever wants to use it. It's there.
Love it.
Then we have some if thens. This is pretty useful. This is really useful for like I want to say football. For golf, probably not as useful, but I do think it can be used in some good ways. One example can be who was the most chalky player this past? I think it was Rom, right?
Yeah, he was like 36%, I think.
Uh, Let me see. Not sure why. Oh, Sean. Oh, I have him unchecked. That's why I don't see him. So if you have someone unchecked from your player pool, they're not going to show up in the player rules. So
Nice.
I went ahead and selected them. So let's say like if I have Rom, then I want to use at least one of I don't know maybe someone that's really cheap and really low owned. So like if I'm eating the chalk, I want to play at least one of like JJ Spawn or something. Again, I don't know how owned this guy was, but this would be like the use case for something like this. If you don't want to be like that forcing, you can also say like if I'm playing Rom, then just I want to like boost this guy by like 15% or something like that because
Yeah, I mean,
it would
you
make
could
it
do
more
that.
likely that you get it, but not every single time.
Look, for people, why people are saying, man, I would never use that, but I think there is a path. Like if you're playing like you want to play ball striker narratives, right? And so you're saying I really like Will Zalatoris up top. So every time I play Will Zalatoris, I want you to go give a boost to Keegan Bradley, Luke List, and all these other ball strikers, because if one of those guys does well, it would stand to reason that there's probably a ball striking correlation to the course, and other guys would probably do well in that setting too. So that is an example of when you could use that and still find that correlation with MPGA.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's a really good example there. Um, and again, we have the at least, at most, exactly, boost, and dock. So you can play around with all of those. You can also say if a lineup doesn't contain ROM, maybe you want to play like at least one of I don't know like Justin Thomas or Kenley or something. I don't know. This is just another way to to select rules that, in my opinion, this is again usually if I'm setting rules down here for golf, generally it's for ownership considerations, but there probably is some correlation stuff like you mentioned
And here's
with
another
like
one.
different narratives and different like start times and etc.
If you're playing Showdown, which I assume all these tools are available for round 3 and round 4 Showdown, I hope. If you're going to play a guy that's starting in the top 5, I always preach that you don't want to be playing tons of guys that start up top just because they're naturally more owned because people are chasing those finishing points. And so you could have an if then rule that if I'm playing this guy, you go dock this guy, this guy, this guy.
Yeah, that would be a perfect use case for this.
Yeah. And the way all this is available for Showdown, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Cool.
So I can go over to I don't know. Let's go over to Sunday.
Yeah.
And I mean here, we're basically in a very similar spot. Almost everything is going to be exactly the same um, as for the full game slate. Obviously, the tee time is going to be a little bit different, but same exact concept. Really, I can't really think of any big differences in the optimizer um, between showdown and regular. But if you can think of any big differences in the game, maybe I can think of some things to show in the optimizer that would be different.
And then one more question. I see over there, you see over there to the right where it has all of our players right above, well, it's just above my big dome. I'm pointing at it right now. Let's say you had a player selected and they don't show up in the pool. You said you guys are still working on getting to where it'll show up that you had them selected, but they showed up in your player pool 0% of the time?
Correct. We don't have that right now.
But
One,
the devs are aware of the request.
they are aware of it. One way that you can actually sort of do that, and
Yep.
it's not going to be the best way to do it. I understand it's not ideal, but let's say you save your lineups. Once you save the lineups, you can then go. Let me see. There was a way. Yeah. So once you go to the save lineups, and let's say I'm going back to the optimizer here, you can see how many of your save lineups are in each player here. So like you can go down here on the left, you can select selected players, I have everyone selected, and you can see this green little number is how much you have of each player in those saved lineups.
I always, whenever I set it above it, I know my player pool, so I'm so particular about the number of players in my player pool. I would know there's 15, and then I see right there on that little tab, it only has 13 players above it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd know right there. Well, 2 guys did not get in there, so I need to go. I need to go do some, you know, twisting around of some stuff to make sure I'm getting all my guys in my pool.
Got it. Maybe one thing we can just do is like maybe we can just have the a column in here in this view for what percentage you have in your lineups, and then once you hit selected players, you can kind of see if any of the guys are zero.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah, I'll forward that over to the dev.
All right. Any other little random things like that lock button or the dock button or any little cool little features that like would seem obvious, but somebody who's just starting to use this out, they may not know?
I'm trying to think. I mean,
Like trashing the lineups. There's a good example. You can go if you make your lineups and you don't like one, you just toss one in the trash here, right?
yeah, correct.
Like,
can
you like a
delete
lot
it.
of them.
You can also select none, and then you can sort of go through and select which ones you like, and then save them. If you hit save here, it's only going to save the ones you have selected. You can do quite a bit on this page. Over here on the right, there's this little filter button. So let's say I want to see all my lineups that have JT Poston. I select this, and these are all the lineups that he's in. That's really useful. And then it's also really useful to see once I select that, I can see in those lineups who else I have, which is really really useful sometimes, especially for like NFL. If you're like you can select your like Tom Brady lineups and see how many of those lineups have Mike Evans versus like Chris Godwin and so on. There is also this is the projected ownership, and this is the actual ownership of like how often these players like showed up in your lineup set. That's really useful sometimes to just glance at and see who you're going to be overweight, who you're going to be underweight. There's this little selection here that you can select different positions, obviously not applicable to golf. And that's pretty much it. There's definitely some more advanced stuff as well. There's you can upload your own projections. If you hit here, the projection / aggregate sets, you can upload basically any projection set. If there is instructions in the FAQ on how to do that. If you have any issues, always feel free to just email us, and we're happy to add support for any other projections that people are trying to upload. You can also like aggregate projections. So let's say you're sub to both ETR and degenerate, and you want to make a projection that's like 50% ETR, 50% degenerate, 75. You can do that right here in our tool, and we can call this like ETR degen 75 mix, and then this would average out the projection, the ceiling, and the ownership 50-50, and I can save that, and then I can select that from here and use that, and you can do that with projections that you're uploading as well. So if you're using any other content providers or your own projections, I think it's pretty easy to do that, and it's an advanced feature, but I think for some more for players who are using multiple projection sources, it's really nice. For other sports, there's late swap, obviously not applicable for golf, but yeah, that's all I can really think of right now. I can't think of anything else. I'm sure we're missing something.
Of course. We'll think of it right after I click stop recording.
Yeah, that's always how it happens.
So, all right. I appreciate your time. Should I go post this on YouTube, or do you guys already have videos like this that I could just guide them to that are already on the Solver's YouTube page?
I think this would be a pretty good video to post. I think we went pretty in depth here. I don't think our videos have gone as in depth. In our tutorials page, we definitely have some more in-depth stuff on specific things. Like we have an in-depth thing on variance, on minimum exposure and maximum exposure. But I think this is a really good overview of all the rules and all the stuff that we went over. So especially for golf, I think this is a really really good overview that we did.
I can't wait to get sweaty making golf lineups with this bad boy now that I know a couple more features that I didn't know before.
Perfect.
So, hey, I appreciate your time, man. We're going to end the video here, so thank you again. I appreciate you being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and good luck to everyone. As always, if there's any questions at all, feel free to just email us. It's support@thesolver.com. Always happy to help.